Hey everyone.
Hello.
Happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween indeed.
Yeah, when you're hearing this, it will be the day before Halloween. Fun stuff. We're talking about one of the most famous or perhaps infamous broadcasts in British television history, Ghostwatch.
Hey, let's go.
Let's ghost!
Let's ghost.
Okay. Hey, Hannah.
Hey, what's up?
I want you to picture something for me here.
Okay.
Just a scene in your mind. Let's say the year is 1992, and you're a kid. You know, older than you actually were. Maybe.
Yeah, I was going to say I was 3 years old.
Sure. Let's say you were 10. Something like that.
Okay.
It's Saturday night, October 31st.
Ooh.
Yeah. So, you know, you were just out trick-or-treating with your friends. You got candy. Had a blast.
Columbus never does trick-or-treating on Saturday nights, but continue, sorry.
Well, this is in England, so don't worry about it.
Don't they not do trick-or-treating in England?
They,
Sorry, I'm killing your momentum. Please continue.
They do, but probably not as much back then.
Yeah.
You had a good time with your friends earlier, but now it's 9:30. You're back at home, but since it's Saturday night, you get to stay up a little bit.
Yay!
And you're thinking, I'm going to turn on the TV. Maybe there's a scary movie on.
Sure.
Something fun. But instead, there isn't. There's just this live broadcast of, like, an investigation of a haunted house.
Well, I mean, maybe I'll watch that. Maybe there are ghosts.
Yeah. It kind of looks like a news segment, maybe some kind of educational show, and it's hosted by that old talk show guy that you don't know the name of, but your parents are always watching him. He's like some news guy.
Dan Rathers.
Yeah, sure. No, but in this case, sure, fine, whatever. It seems pretty normal at first. You know, it's not the scary movie you were hoping for, but it kind of fits the spooky theme. It's Halloween. They're talking about ghosts and stuff. But then you start to see some things. Stuff is moving. There's a figure standing in the background. Things are getting scarier and scarier.
Ooh.
A phone number pops up on the screen that says, hey, if you have any experiences with the supernatural or you see something that we're recording, call and talk to us about it. And you call that number, and it's a busy signal. Lots of people are calling this number. Someone else calls about the figure that you saw earlier. And when the screen shows it, you see it again. But then when it shows it again, it's gone. Things continue to escalate. Further and further, more scary things are happening, noises happening. At one point, the screen cuts away, and you see in the studio pandemonium, lights flashing, and it seems like that host guy, he's like possessed by a ghost.
What? A real, actual, live, dead ghost?
Yeah. You turn off the TV, because that's the end of it. And you try to go to bed, but you can't sleep.
No, I'm sleeping in Mom and Dad's bed for sure.
Yeah. What you saw on TV tonight wasn't a movie. It couldn't have been. It had to be real.
Yeah, it was that news guy.
Yeah. So, this is the experience that lots of people had. Young people, others. In 1992, October 31st, Saturday night, in the UK, after watching Ghostwatch on BBC One. You know how people talk about, like, Blair Witch, about how, like, they thought it was real, and, like, they saw the website, and they were like, yeah, this is totally a whole real thing?
Yes, although I am more familiar with that with, like, Paranormal Activity. I had a old, like, coworker who swore to everything on the world that Paranormal Activity was an actual documentary and that those were not actors.
Yeah, totally. You know the whole War of the Worlds thing where people thought there was actually like an alien invasion?
Dubious claims on that, but yes.
Dubious claims on that. Ghostwatch is the British version of this. And there is actually pretty good documented evidence that lots of people thought this was actually real.
Well, yeah, it was like a news guy. Like,
yeah.
It wasn't an actor. It was a guy on the news.
Yeah, that's certainly what it seemed like.
It would be like if Dane Rather was like, yes, and here I am in my haunted house.
Yeah. So let me rewind a bit. In 1988, this writer, Stephen Volk, he's like a Welsh horror writer. At this point, he was best known for writing 2 films. One was Gothic, which was from 1986, directed by Ken Russell, the guy who directed Women in Love and The Who's Tommy and all that kind of stuff. And also he wrote The Kiss, which was from 1988 and was directed by Penn Densham, who also, he was the writer for Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, and also produced the Tank Girl movie. Some weird people that he worked with here.
Wild character
yeah.
I've not seen either of those movies, but they both sound familiar to me.
Yeah. I think that if you were British, you probably would get those more.
Sure.
We're not as tuned into 1980s British horror films.
No, yeah, we've got all of the Michael Myers and Freddy Kruegers and stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
Which I've also not seen.
What?
I've seen the first Nightmare on Elm Street. I've never seen. I've seen part 2 of Rob Zombie's Halloween.
Oh, terrible
movie. That's the only one that I've seen.
We're gonna have to do Halloween at the very least.
Yeah, I'd love to see their first original Halloween.
It's fantastic, and the first 2 Nightmare on Elm Streets are fun.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say they're great, but they're fun. But anyway, so Stephen Volk, he has this kind of style where he likes to write these sort of horror stories that tend to kind of be about real people. In the movie Gothic, apparently Mary and Percy Shelley are characters in the movie.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, he just kind of does some stuff like that.
Yeah.
So he already kind of likes to blend, he likes to blur the lines between, fantasy and reality a little bit. He came up with this idea for a 6-part miniseries where a investigative journalist and a psychic were going to investigate some spooky haunted house. And this was sort of based on the Enfield hauntings. Have you ever heard of the Enfield hauntings?
No, although that sounds like in an old British manor.
So the Enfield hauntings is kind of the British version of the Amityville horror. It was late 70s horror that everybody was really excited.
It really happened to a real family not that far from here.
Yeah, basically these 2 young girls in a house in England were supposedly being haunted by a poltergeist. And it was a big deal. People got really into it.
I do feel like I vaguely heard of this before, but also all ghost stories sound a little bit the same.
Yeah, I mean, you're not wrong. But he was kind of inspired by this, and he was just okay, I'm going to do this 6-episode miniseries, and the last episode of the miniseries will be a live investigation episode, and that'll be kind of fun. And he pitched that to BBC, and BBC was we don't want to do 6 episodes. We have no idea if this is going to be successful. Tell you what, why don't we do one 90-minute special and have it just be that live investigation? So just one 90-minute live investigation kind of thing. And he was yeah, that sounds like a good idea. They signed off on it, and they got, the directors and the producers. So the main producer was this woman named Ruth Baumgarten, and the director was another woman named Leslie Manning. And they really liked this idea at the time where you couldn't trust what was on television, that the lines between fiction and fact were blurred, and that you weren't really sure what you were seeing was real or not in the early 90s.
In the early 90s.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Before the craze of reality TV and whatnot.
And AI video. I'm really sorry, Leslie and Ruth, if you guys are still out there. It's only gotten worse. Oh no. Anyway, but to kind of play this up, they cast Michael Parkinson. Michael Parkinson was one of the UK's most popular and well-known talk show hosts at the time, and he was going to play the host of this, investigation of this spooky, ooky, dooky house.
Okay, now, so, talk show host. Is this more I don't know, a late night talk show kind of thing, like a Johnny Carson sort of deal, or?
Well, we'll kind of talk about some of the stuff that he did later, but he was mainly known for interviewing celebrities. That was his big thing. He did these one-on-one interviews with celebrities. He was also on like game shows and things like that, but you know, he was mainly known for, I wouldn't necessarily say like hard-hitting journalism, but nonfiction. When he was on television, he was a real guy who was talking to real people.
So more like Barbara Walters then.
Yeah,
Okay.
kind of like that. We'll talk about some of the other people who were in it, but a lot of the other people in it were other well-known BBC presenters at the time.
Mm-hmm.
That also kind of added to this like air of legitimacy, to this air of like, you know, this is kind of like a real show that we're watching, not just like a movie that people are acting in, but like some actual like investigation.
Yeah.
BBC was really worried that people would think that this was real, that wasn't fiction. They were actually worried about this.
Yeah.
So they, you know, they advertised it in the TV guide ahead of time, and they also insisted that it have the BBC Screen 1 intro. Screen 1 was like a drama, you know, like series, and so they had that intro, which made it clear that it was fiction.
Masterpiece Theater as opposed to like you know,
Yeah.
the local news station thing.
Kind of like that, yeah. And the creators of the show didn't want that, but they understood, like, okay, we got to do that, fine, whatever.
Yeah, but how many people are going to tune in early enough to catch that bit?
Here's the problem with that even. You're right on with it. Guess what time it started?
Like 9:30?
9:25.
What the heck?
Yeah. So if you turned it on at 9:30, it had already started.
And you missed that
And
bit.
you missed that bit. Oops.
Oopsie doozy.
Oh no, guys. Oh no. Oops. Oh no.
Was this live or was it like pre-recorded?
It was pre-recorded, but it was presented as though it were live.
Okay.
And there were moments where, like, you know, people called in and things like that.
Oh,
so
okay.
if you didn't realize it, like, you know, you might think it was real.
Especially if you then called the number and it was like busy,
Yeah.
but it was just like, you know, not in service.
Exactly. So it was kind of a perfect storm, and BBC did not understand how popular it would be.
Mm-hmm.
They thought, oh, maybe some people watch this. It's on at like 9:30 on a Saturday. Who the hell is going to watch it? It's Halloween.
Everybody's got better things to do. They're all going to fancy dress parties. I know what
Yeah.
you guys call it over there.
They had no idea what was coming. They had no idea the firestorm that was about to be sparked by this.
I bet.
Yeah. And to this day, Ghostwatch is considered one of the most infamous television moments in British history. I have never seen it.
Yeah.
I have heard about it by reputation. People have talked about it. You know, I think the first person I remember recently talking about it was Jay Bauman on Red Letter Media. He talked a little bit about it, but I also saw some people online, the people who read horror, spooky stuff. A lot of them are British, and a lot of them are like, oh yeah, Ghostwatch, big part of my upbringing and childhood and how I got into this. So we're going to watch this. And I'm really excited.
Yeah, I'm pretty excited too.
We'll be back soon, and we'll tell you if ghosts are real. And we're back.
And we're back.
What did you think?
That was really good.
I'm gonna say I am surprised how much I liked that.
We're pretty sure it was like pre-recorded, right? Like it wasn't
Yes,
live.
it was 100%
Okay.
recorded ahead of time.
Yeah, so they did a very good job of like setting things up so it looked like it was being recorded live,
Yes.
even though it was pre-recorded. You know, like live reactions almost
Yeah.
to what's going on. Oh boy, it was very ooky spooky.
Yeah, I again, Donovan's going to talk about pacing. It has a very slow build-up.
Yes, it does.
Which I like. I think it's very fun. Like some people might say it's boring for the first like 40 minutes or so. I'm not going to argue with you, but like I feel like it does a good job building the atmosphere. It does a good job kind of getting you involved with the characters and kind of knowing where everything is. There's a lot of setup, and then you get little just bits of payoff. Little bits of here, spooks there, things you see out of the corner of your eye, things in the reflections, noises in the background. And then the last 20 minutes are, like, my heart was pounding.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I was legitimately, like on edge. Like, I don't know if I would call it, like, super scary, but, like, I was on edge.
If I thought that if I was watching this as a kid in like 1993 and like watching this live on TV, I would be terrified. I would not be able to go to sleep that night.
Yeah.
I will argue with someone saying like the first 40 minutes are boring or whatever. I highly disagree. I am the kind of person who like basically always is playing a game on my phone as I'm watching TV, and like I was super engaged the entire time.
Yeah, because the whole time you're watching, you're waiting for something to be in the background.
Yeah.
You're waiting.
Well, we also had the benefit of knowing that this is like an hour and a half, and so like we got like 20 or 30 minutes in, and like I was having a great time listening to all the like the callers talking about their ghost stories and like following all of the cuts and figuring out who all of these people are. But I was like, man, stuff has got to start happening soon, because like we're like 40 minutes an hour in, and like there's been some stuff, but like there's that, like, when are things gonna ramp up?
Yeah, no, I was very impressed by the way that they pulled a lot of that stuff off. I have to say, I just really liked it. There were a lot of like good practical effects, a lot of, moments where you see something in a reflection and then the camera holds for just long enough so the actor can leave the room, and then you turn and he's not there. Lots of just little like camera tricks. Having the early setup of the infrared and then the way they deployed the infrared towards the end. Yeah. Like legitimately, wow. What a great way to do that.
Yeah, especially because when they use the infrared, they've made the point of saying that like ghosts can create like cold spots, basically. And when they finally use the infrared, like they've been saying all night, like, oh gosh, it's so cold in here and the heater isn't working, and it's already dark. And so like you can see the hot spot of like the woman in front of the camera, but like because the whole house is already dark and cold, you don't know if there's anything moving back there.
Yeah, it's really freaky. They do a great job of kind of building up the phone calls, where everyone's calling in and talking about their spooky stuff, and then some people are sort of like just giving you little bits of lore, little just like feeding, drips and drabs of
local stories, or like, I knew someone who lived on that street.
Yeah, exactly.
So you and I have been separately having a long conversation about horror.
Yes.
And what makes something scary. And a lot of the time we agree that like a horror movie is always scarier before you know what the thing is. Yeah. Like, I've not seen the Babadook, but like once you see the Babadook, it's like, oh, it's a guy in a hat. Oh no, it's so spooky. But one of the things that I really like about this is that like everything is in like shadows and in the corner, and there's nothing that's like outright stated, this is what it is. Yeah. And it leaves you hanging on like such a cliffhanger that like something terrible happened in that house that night as it was being recording, and we the public don't know what it is.
That is absolutely correct. And the kind of late fake out, where you're watching it and then you see everything kind of return to normal, and then we realize, oh, that's not actually what's happening right now. Like that's a great little moment, because everyone's you're sort of like, wait, what? And everyone's kind of on edge because they're like, hey, what's happening?
Yeah. And then it's the fake out. Everything has gone terrible. Everyone is screaming and terrified, and then the camera cuts out, and then it cuts back, and they're just sitting in the living room apparently playing a board game. And how they got there and why that's happening, unexplained. Yeah. And the sound is not working, and they can't communicate with anybody inside the house. People inside the house can't communicate back out again. Oh. And then it's like, this isn't live. Yeah.
I would say unqualified, this is great. It's really fun. It's a great, like, you just want to watch something ooky spooky. You want to have a good time with some ghost stuff. If you're like me and somebody who spent a lot of time watching, like, ghost hunter shows, as growing up, and, not really believing in it, but finding it fascinating. Mm-hmm. Like, this is basically like if ghost hunters or whoever like actually found something. Yeah. Like this, that it really does feel like that kind of thing. It's like, oh, this is like if they, actually like ever saw anything, like this is kind of how that would go. Yeah. And I think that's really fun. I would be remiss as well if I didn't mention a couple of things that bothered me a little bit. You said it is very realistic for it being like a live broadcast. I agree with that completely. You can tell though that like things are very tight. Things are happening very quickly and at a pace that is not realistic. And if you really nitpick and pay attention, it's not going to feel that way.
Yeah, like right at the beginning before any of like the stuff happened, there's just like a little clip of like two girls, and they're like arguing with each other because one wants the light out because she wants to go to bed and the other one doesn't yet. And like watching it, I'm like, this is not how people behave when they're unobserved.
Yeah, I think the main actors all did a really good job.
Oh, absolutely.
But I definitely feel like the two little girls and some of the side characters who were giving like the ghost stories, or talking on the phone, you could tell that they were not quite as good at it. You could kind
natural,
of
not quite as natural.
Exactly. And that's fine. Like for a low budget, like made for TV spooky movie that this was, like that's totally fine, and the main people are good enough that they do really sell it. And let me be clear about this: they were all TV people, but they weren't really like movie actors. Like that's not really what most of them were doing. That's not really what their job was. I think in particular Michael Parkinson playing the host is fantastic.
Oh, he's so good.
He's really, really good at like keeping the show moving in a very like professional way, like you would if you were in a real television show. And then, when he starts to think this is all a hoax, he just gets really dismissive and he's just like, all right, okay, come on. And then at the end, he's like losing it. He's literally losing it.
Yeah. You were saying earlier that like the whole production feeling very like tight, where like everybody was saying their line and then the next person was saying their line, and like they weren't necessarily talking in a supernatural rhythm. And one of the things that people do is they oftentimes talk over each other. So like at the end when he was arguing with Dr. Pascoe and like they started talking over each other, I was like, oh yeah, now we're here.
Yeah, and then Mike Smith in the background, he's just like, no, I want it on TV. I want to see what's happening. And then Craig is talking like, and he's like, oh, I can't hear anything. Yeah, it's
the lights are going down. Yeah, we've got a backup generator, and like so he's saying all of this. Like, no, pull it back up. Yeah,
that's a really good bit. I said, I think the last like 15 to 20 minutes of this movie is like fantastic. Like I could just watch the last 15 to 20 minutes of this movie over and over again. It's so much fun. There's lots of little things, and I'm sure if I watched it again, I would see more of them.
Yeah.
But like, it's a very rewarding movie to watch closely.
Yeah, and I will say there are some things that like perhaps I was expecting some things to happen because of like modern horror that I watch a lot and like a lot. So the setup on like the studio stage, like the BBC stage, it is the reporter Michael, what's his last name?
Michael Parkinson,
and then Dr. Pascoe, who's like a paranormal investigator kind of thing.
Yes.
And they're like the direct on shot is both of them sitting on either side, and then behind them there's a fire, and there's like a picture above the fire of like a classic sheet ghost.
Yeah,
right?
It's great.
Like the whole time, every time they cut back to that shot, I was looking at that sheet ghost like, you're gonna change, and I know it.
And
it didn't
change. But what did change is that at the fire, at the very beginning, it's just like a little, like, fire in the background, just kind of like set the scene. But at the end, it's like a roaring fire. Mm-hmm. Like as the tension rises, it becomes like bigger and bigger, and wilder. Just lots of little details like that. Whenever the camera feed goes out or the audio went wonky or something like that, we just did the episode about analog horror. This is the same techniques that were deployed for that. This is like primordial, like early versions of it, and they did a really good job. Didn't overdo it. I was a little worried they might overdo that kind of stuff. I really don't feel like they did.
Yeah.
I was very impressed.
I will also, so one of the horror aspects that I really liked is like the slow drip of information.
Yes.
Of like, this is what the kids are seeing. This is kind of like the shape. And then you see like in the like a very like faint in the background, a shape of what might be a man there. And then you get a couple of stories like a mother Stodden or like and then like towards the very end, there's like somebody who calls in and is like, no, I knew the guy who lived there. He was a psychopath.
Yeah.
And he died and got eaten by his cats. He killed himself and got eaten by his cats. And so like there's this slow drip of information. You're given like a little bit more and a little bit more, and you can connect it back to the stuff that has been happening in the house, of like the things that people have been seeing and saying and hearing. And that was very good and very effective. And then right at the end, when shit started popping off in the studio, Dr. Pascoe was like, we've created a giant seance. Everybody is staring at their TV and thinking about this entity. And it's the idea of like thinking about ghosts or the supernatural gives it power. And that's the power that it can use to hurt you. That's the horror.
Yeah.
Like, there's that terrible movie like The Bye-Bye Man or whatever, like Don't Think It, Don't Say It. That's a terribly executed movie, but a fantastic idea of like, if you think about it, if you talk about it, it has power over you.
Yeah,
horrifying.
I think, it's great. And, They didn't do it in the movie, but I almost expected, because there's this moment where she's like, can we get the geographical information on all the people that are calling? And over the whole movie, you see this like map of the UK, and you see these little like dots, these little like, cross markers kind of where people are calling in. Mm-hmm. And part of me almost wanted a scene where they were like, can we get a map where we overlay all of the phone calls from tonight? And if it was like a pentagram or something, or some kind of weird like pagan symbol or something like that. Like, that would have been kind of fun. Maybe it would have been overdoing it, but like part of me was expecting that.
I was a little bit too. Yeah. Especially like she mentioned at one point, like, I've looked at everything about the house, and like she listed off a bunch of the stuff, and then
the
right
ley
at the
lines.
end, the ley lines.
Yeah, she talked about the ley lines.
Right
yeah.
at the end.
That's always a big thing in like, especially like British folk horror. They always talk about ley lines.
Yeah. One of the things that I really liked is that, like, right at the end, as stuff was going terribly wrong in the studio, it sort of seemed like people there were disappearing.
Yes.
Of, like...
either they were running away, or, like, they literally just disappeared.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love how they get to, like, 5 minutes before, and the guy, he's like, hey, like, stuff's happening, like, stay with us here.
Yeah.
I could totally imagine if somebody was tuning in at that point being like, what the fuck am I watching? Like, what is happening? It was
we're delaying your next program because things have been started to develop here, and we're going to have you stay with us.
Yeah. So we could talk a little bit more, but I wanted to kind of talk about some of the people in this movie.
Sure.
Michael Parkinson as the host.
Yeah.
He was very, very famous in Britain at the time. Like, super, super famous. He was a cricket player, he was a journalist, and, like, a TV host. He presented for a news show called 24 Hours. He was on Good Morning Britain, their version of Good Morning America. Obviously, I don't know if they were
Which one
first.
came first.
It doesn't matter. He was on a popular game show called Give Us a Clue. And he was known for interviewing celebrities. Like, he had a show for a while called Parkinson One-on-One, where he just interviewed celebrities. Mm-hmm. He says he's interviewed 2,000 celebrities. He died a few years ago, but...
wow, that's insane.
Yeah. And he said that his favorite was Muhammad Ali, and his biggest regret was not interviewing Frank Sinatra. Those were the two that I saw in his little bio there. I thought that was interesting. Just seemed like kind of an interesting persona. He was like in the press corps in the military.
Oh, I'm sorry, what a classically British guy.
Yes, like, very British.
played cricket, was a journalist, press corps in the war.
Yeah, like it's legitimately
on a game show.
Having him absolutely made it feel more real. He sells this movie. I don't know if anybody else can pull this off. Like, there are probably other people out there, but I can't think of one off the top of my head that would have been able to pull this off. And I don't know who Michael Parkinson is. I didn't watch British TV in the 80s. That just wasn't my life. But I believe it. Like,
oh yeah, absolutely.
He does such a great job. Dr. Lynn Pascoe, her name is Gillian Bevan, is the actress who plays her. Like, she's one of the few who's actually like an actress and not just like a TV presenter.
Well, yeah, because you wanted to have someone who had a little bit of like work under their belt, because they're going to be like the other main focal point, essentially.
She did a few TV shows, none that I really recognize. But she was mainly known as a stage actress, specifically like a musical actress.
Oh.
She played Mrs. Lovett in the West End production of, Sweeney Todd. She was in Into the Woods, a lot of Sondheim, apparently. Like, she just, she was like a musical actress. Really cool. And I also think a very good choice, because especially at that point, she would not have been super recognizable to a TV audience, but she was an accomplished actress. So, like, you could absolutely be like, oh, I don't know who that is, but, like, she's doing a good job.
Yeah.
I think that was smart. I don't know if they did that on purpose, but I do think that was a really smart thing to do. Sarah Green, the one who kind of went into the house.
Yeah.
So she was a children's entertainer on television at the time.
Oh.
She did BBC children's shows in the 80s and 90s. At that time, she was doing a show called Going Live. Going Live, I don't know anything about, but the best that I can tell, it was sort of like a similar concept to like All That, where there were like skits and like they did like Double Dare in there, like and stuff. It was just like a whole like all over the place kind of thing. I don't know. It's not really something I'm very familiar with. But like that was what she was known for at the time. She had done a bunch of children's stuff, and similarly, I'll talk about this later, but like one of the big reasons why people sort of thought that this was real is they were like, well, they wouldn't put a children's entertainer in a scary movie.
Yeah.
They wouldn't do that. Why would they do that?
Why would you have Mr. Rogers be in Paranormal
Exactly!
Activity?
That's what, honestly,
Yeah.
there's a point to that. If I was watching the fucking Blair Witch and Bill Nye was there, I'd be like, what the fuck? I would just be so confused.
Mr. Nicer, what is happening?
Yeah.
I need you to explain it to me with math, please.
Yeah, exactly.
Or some sort of fun science-based rap.
Yeah. Mike Smith, the guy who was taking the phone calls, he was the co-host for a show on the BBC called Breakfast Time. Again, I'm not really familiar with this show, but it was like a morning show, very popular at the time. Probably the thing he was best known for is he was a presenter for Top of the Pops.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah, so if you've ever watched Top of the Pops from like the 80s, like you have certainly seen this man. Mm-hmm. He was also one of the TV presenters and stuff for Live Aid, like 1985.
Yeah.
So if you have the DVD of Live Aid, you've seen this man. He and Sarah were really married.
I was going to ask, yeah.
Yeah, they were married from 1989 until 2014 until Mike unfortunately passed away.
Aw.
That was them, you
Yeah.
know? And they, even though they're not in the same room, you can definitely tell that they have chemistry and affection for each other. I splitting them up to me is an interesting choice, like having him in the studio and her out in the field when you're considering, like, you know, because if you did a movie, usually you'd be like, oh, we want the married couple to be like together, you know,
So that they're constantly worried about each other.
Yeah, or they can be separate, but like you would lean on that a little bit more. So the fact that he's in the studio, like, no, it's all right, and not until the very end is he like, no, get her on the screen. I want to see
get my
her.
wife on the screen.
It adds like some realism. I do think that's an interesting creative choice. Craig Charles as the reporter, the one who's cracking jokes, walking around wearing the Chicago Bears jacket. He was best known for playing Dave Lister on Red Dwarf.
Oh, that's who that guy was.
Yeah.
I was like, his looks so familiar. But I was stuck on Mickey from Doctor Who, Rose's friend from like the first season with Eccleston.
Yeah, no.
I was like, that's not that guy.
I can see why you would think that.
Yeah.
But no, yeah, he was Dave Lister on Red Dwarf. The thing I remember him most for as a kid was he was like one of the hosts of Robot Wars.
Oh,
you know, the show where they build robots and they fight each other.
Yeah.
Yeah, like Donovan was a fan of that. Surprise, surprise. He was the host of the UK version of Takeshi's Castle. Like, he did the voiceover, which I've never watched that one. I can't imagine it's anything like Most Extreme Elimination like we had in the US.
No, I would bet not.
That was a very different thing. Different
vibes.
And he also had a long stint on the British soap Coronation Street. Like 10 years or something like that.
Yeah.
So he did like a wide variety of stuff, all the way from like kids to adult comedy to soap operas to like hosting shows. Like, he did a lot of stuff, and he's still around. He still does a bunch of stuff.
Hell yeah, good for him.
Great career. We won't talk about a lot of the actors. So the two kids, they didn't really seem to be in anything else. They were in like one or two other things in minor roles. They didn't seem like they continued acting as a career.
Sure.
Good for them. Just a few other ones were in kind of smaller stuff. I will mention that Dr. Emilio Silvestri, the American skeptic guy, played by a guy named Colin Stinton. He's been in a bunch of stuff. He was in The Bourne Ultimatum. He was in Rush. Bit parts in like Queen's Gambit and The Crown. He seems like he's just like, oh, we need an American for this British show. Let's hire him. He was also in a James Bond movie. He was in Tomorrow Never Dies. We'll get to it.
The first time they brought this guy on, I was listening to him. I'm like, I know that man's voice.
His voice is very like recognizable.
Yeah, so I had to look him up right then.
I will also say maybe one of my less favorite things about the movie, and like this is a nit to pick, but I'm gonna pick it. I really hate the trope of like, oh, the smarmy smart guy who comes in and rains on everybody's parade because he doesn't believe in ghosts. Like, there's always that guy, and he's always an asshole. Like, he's never in any way sympathetic. You're always supposed to think that guy's an asshole. And Dr. Pascoe even says like a couple of things where, she's like, he's the last of the materialists, like the last of the dinosaurs. And like my thought process is maybe this was just like an early 90s mode of thinking, but like were people like maybe it was like new age spirituality or whatever, but were people like oh yeah, no, everyone's gonna know in the 90s that there's spiritualism and ghosts and things and all of that hardcore science skeptic shit's gonna die out. Like, were people really thinking that?
I don't think so, because like there definitely was a rise of spiritualism in the 90s, and like people practicing like witchcraft and Wicca and that kind of stuff.
Sure.
But also like what I remember from the 90s was like so hardcore, like people going like, we're gonna figure everything out, like we're gonna nail down cold fusion, and we're gonna like create superconductors, and we're gonna like have unlimited clean energy, and like all this kind of like, that's what I remember from the 90s.
Yeah.
Now I, as a child, was a huge nerd and spent a lot of time watching Bill Nye and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So perhaps my recollection is different from reality, but like I feel like there was a rise of both, and I feel like it was like a tension between the two of them. I will say I found it kind of interesting that like they cut away from him and then they never brought him back. So like in a movie that is somewhat similar to this, Late Night with the Devil.
I was literally going to talk about Late Night with the Devil.
So there is also a character in there that's like the smarmy rationalist kind of skeptic sort of man, and he has that whole bit where he like basically hypnotizes someone into like believing that they have seen something horrible. And then later, because it is a real demon possession, probably, like he gets a comeuppance essentially, and that never came up for this guy. Like, did he continue watching the show? Was like their weird phenomena? Did the weird phenomena that was happening in England reach all the way across the pond to that guy?
Yeah, he's just there to fulfill that function of the plot where you need some guy to check you, and that's fine. It's just the fact that he's so smarmy, and also he's American, and all the British people are like, oh, that fucking American asshole from New York.
Oh, also, one thing that annoyed me is that, like, so when she was talking to him, Dr. Pascal was like, he was like, well, it needs to be measurable. You need to be able to replicate it in a lab. And she was like, oh, in a lab. Can you explain love in a lab? Yes, we can.
Yeah.
It turns out there's a bunch of chemicals in your brain that makes you fall in love with someone. That doesn't mean that those feelings aren't real and true and important, but, like, you can, in fact, measure it. You can. Yeah,
that's such a, like... I hate to say it, but that's such a, like, writer who hated science class thing to write, Anyway, the mom, Pam Early, is played by a woman named Brid Brennan. She was in a few episodes of Peaky Blinders.
Oh, cool.
She's in lots of stuff, just, like, she's still acting to this day. The main thing is that she's, like, one of the handmaidens in the 1981 Excalibur movie. Like, I just saw that in her thing. Like, wow, what a strange, like... start to your career.
That is a movie that I have considered watching for this, because my dad had the VHS and I have very vague remembrances of like watching that movie as a kid.
I'll be honest, I've never actually seen it.
Yeah.
I'm like aware of it culturally, but I never actually watched the movie. And then last, and this is my favorite one, Pipes, the guy who played Pipes.
Yeah.
He was played by a guy named Keith Ferrari.
Ha, what an amazing name.
Yeah, an amazing thing. Here's the thing. No one knows anything about him. He does not fucking exist anywhere. Ooh. There are photos of him. There's like information, like you can find some, like, but like he's not in any other movies as far as I can tell. And when they made the documentary about Ghostwatch, years later, and they tried to interview him, they couldn't track him down. He disappeared.
What?
Yeah.
How much you want to bet Keith Ferrari is a fake name?
I'm pretty sure it is. Man, like, who the fuck's name is Keith Ferrari? That guy fucks every night. Like,
it 100% sounds like, what's your name, sir? Keith, looking left and right, see a sports car, Ferrari.
Yeah, exactly. That's amazing. I love Keith Ferrari. I hope he's good. He's probably dead. Who the hell knows? Yeah, no one knows what happened.
He was only 93. He might not be dead yet. Unless he was like 70 when they made this.
I have no idea. I also wanted to mention briefly the director for Ghostwatch. Leslie Manning. I kind of mentioned that a minute ago. Leslie Manning has been like a director for like spooky stuff for a long time. She did a show called Ghosts in the 90s as well. And most recently, she's done a bunch of, like, short films. She did one called Curtain Call, one called The Vest, one called Seven, one called Help, one called The Joke. These all seem like they're, like film festival short form horror.
Yeah.
And I'm actually interested in watching those because I really love short form horror.
I do too. I would love to watch some short form horror with you.
Yeah.
Because there are some that I've been meaning to watch, but I don't want to while I'm alone.
Yeah.
Because I need my very solid rationalist boyfriend with me.
That's me. Anyway, very cool. The realism for this movie was effective in lots of ways.
Agreed.
And while most adults watching it could tell within a few minutes that this was fantasy, this was not real, not everybody felt that way.
Sure.
There were two groups in particular who seemed to think that maybe it was real. Kids, that makes sense,
Yeah.
and elderly folks, especially
Sure.
in the early 90s. They probably didn't grow up with television, so...
Yeah, it's like now when your grandma believes the AI video on Facebook about Jesus coming back.
Yeah, more or less. Like I said, the show starting at 9:25 meant that if you tuned in at 9:30, you missed sort of the beginning Screen One BBC drama production,
And that had all the actors' names.
Yeah, exactly. If you called the number, the BBC actually set up a line so that if you called the number, it would say, "Hey guys, this is a fictional television show, but if you want to talk to us about spiritual stuff or ghost stuff, please do. We'll have somebody listen to you." They had crazy number of calls that night.
Oh, yeah?
And the lines got all jammed up.
Of course.
So when people called, there was a busy signal. There are some estimates that they got over 1 million calls that night.
Jeez.
1 million.
How many people were living in England in 1993?
I have no idea, but yeah, oh yeah, look up the population number. Hang on.
Okay, 57 million.
Yeah, okay. But 57 million people in the entire country, that means that a significant portion of them are watching the show, and then a significant portion of them are calling in. That's pretty wild.
Yeah.
Because you have to imagine that most of the people watching aren't calling in.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's pretty insane. I have to say. BBC got a lot of backlash for this.
I can imagine.
So people were really critical. A lot of tabloids were very critical of BBC for airing the show. People just thought in general it was too scary to be on television.
That's silly.
I don't disagree with you, but people thought that it was just too scary to start with.
Okay, I will say there's not a whole bunch of blood and gore or anything like that, but there's a little girl and her face gets scratched up. So if people, especially in the 90s, who are less cynicism pilled than the rest of us here in 2025, I can definitely see them being why would they show that on TV?
I also think that, the ghost, you don't get a good look at him, but the ghost is pretty horrifying. He's got a messed up face and his eyes are eaten and stuff. It's
even just the little girl describing it, ugh, gross.
And a lot of people argue that they didn't really do enough to show that it was fictional. I can understand if you missed the very beginning and you didn't watch the credits at the very end. You just kind of watched the middle part, and you were not very media savvy. You might think that, but I don't know how much responsibility the BBC would have had in this. And they did run in the TV guide, and there were things saying, hey, tonight there's going to be a scary movie. It's going to be called Ghostwatch. But if you didn't read the TV guide and you weren't watching earlier in the day when they said that stuff, you just would miss that.
Yeah.
You just, it was not something that was pervasive. And also, you didn't have Google. You couldn't just type, hey, what's this Ghostwatch shit? You just couldn't do that. BBC argued that they did everything right. It aired during a drama slot. That time of night is when drama movies or whatever were shown.
Yeah.
They advertised it ahead of time, like I said. I think the main thing was that they just didn't realize how popular it would be.
Sure.
They thought it would be a small thing that would maybe get a few million viewers. Hey, it would be cool. And that would be it. But because it was so popular, it had this runaway success sort of thing. There was apparently a lot of word of mouth. A lot of people were watching it and being like, hey, you got to watch this. It's scary.
Turn on BBC One now.
And that kind of did the thing. Some people argued, as I mentioned before, that having a kids show person made some people think it was appropriate for kids. Like, some of the backlash was that, like, BBC didn't do enough to say, hey, this is an adult's spooky show. Like, kids should not be watching this. This isn't appropriate for them.
I can see that if I were a mom and, like, the lady who does Reading Rainbow or whatever, the British version of that is on TV and it's like Halloween. It's like, oh, she's doing a fun spooky thing. Like,
for kids.
The kids can watch this.
Yeah.
And then everything terrible happens.
I think that's really the only thing I can really, like, say to BBC is like, yeah, you know what? Maybe having the kids presenter be on the is probably
that might have been a little bit of a sketchy decision.
And I don't think she did a bad job.
No, excellent.
I think she did a great job, but, like, I can see why people would have felt that way. There was even a rumor that Sarah Green advertised the show on going live, like, hey, I'm going to be doing this thing. That was not true. Didn't happen. However, later on, I think it was on that show or maybe it was on a different show, she did go in front of a bunch of kids and say, hey, so I was in this thing, it was fake. So if you watched it, it was definitely not real, you know, and you know, she had to do that after the fact. That was probably a good thing.
Yeah, fair enough.
But, you know, still. Supposedly, there were 2 children who were diagnosed with PTSD due to watching the show. There was an article that I read that I learned about. Basically, it said that they thought the diagnosis was of questionable validity.
Sure.
But that
allegedly, yeah.
You know, because, you know, there seems to be an argument about whether or not it was really PTSD or if they just got really scared for a while and then eventually they were fine. Because, like, when you're a kid, it's really hard to know what's going to stick with you and what's going to slide off your back after a week or two. You know?
Sure.
But supposedly 2 kids were diagnosed with PTSD because of the show. On the other side of the age bracket, supposedly a woman sent the BBC a bill for new pants for her husband because he had shit them. And I have no idea if the BBC paid, but that is so fucking funny to me.
That's so good.
I love it a lot. But the vast majority of people who watched this knew it was fantasy, knew it wasn't a problem, and were fine. Unfortunately, the show had a victim.
Oh?
It was a young man. His name was Martin Denham. He had a learning disability and possibly other mental challenges. He watched it and was apparently very traumatized. He lived in a council house that had bad pipes.
Oh.
And less than a week after he committed suicide.
Oh, Jesus.
And in his note, he basically talked about ghosts.
That's awful.
It's really, really horrible. Like, this is one of those things where it's like, I don't think that the makers of this show or the BBC are in any way responsible for this because, like, if it wasn't this, it could have been something else. Like, you know, some folks, they have challenges and, like, you never know what's going to cause that kind of thing.
Without the right help and support.
Exactly.
Then, something horrible can happen.
But I want to mention him and mention his name because, you know, he was a real person who lost his life because he couldn't separate fact from reality, and this show maybe didn't help that. And I feel terrible about it. And you know, there's always going to be a little bit of a cloud hanging over this, you know, whole situation, even though I think it's a great movie. And, you know, like I said, I don't think anybody bears culpability in any way, but it is kind of shitty. Yeah. That's, you know, what happened. You can like Catcher in the Rye, but, you know, that guy did shoot John Lennon. Like, you know, that's just the kind of thing that's going to happen. So, dovetailing from this terrible thought, several other films had scares like Ghostwatch. This was not a unique occurrence.
Oh?
Obviously, people talk about War of the Worlds.
Sure, yeah.
You know, there is some historical question about whether or not people were actually fooled or not. Who knows? There was a movie in 1994 called Without Warning, which was like an American movie. It took place in Wyoming, and it was kind of a similar concept, except it was like asteroids hitting the Earth, and it was presented like it was like a news broadcast. And apparently some people who watched it got scared and thought it was a real news broadcast, even though multiple times they were like, this is fake, but, it just kind of happens. This happened in 1994, and, similarly. In fact, it's literally inspired by War of the Worlds, because the name of the town in the movie is called Grover's Mill, Wyoming, and Orson Welles was Grover's Mill, New Jersey. So it's obviously it's a sort of send up of that. Yeah, there was the one in the 80s called Special Bulletin, which was kind of like a nuclear bombing sort of thing. They made very careful references, to disclaimers to make sure that this was not real. This is a dramatization.
Yeah.
But there were definitely some affiliates of NBC who made it, who were like, we're not going to show this because
people might get scared that there's actually a nuclear annihilation.
Yeah, we're just not going to do that.
What year did you say that was?
1983.
Yeah, so that's like in the middle of the Cold War, yeah?
Yeah. Certainly the 80s, post détente part of the Cold War.
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely be hesitant about, like, this is still in the middle of, like, mutually assured destruction. I would be very concerned about showing that.
Yeah, and then, Blair Witch, Paranormal Activity, we talked about that. The found footage genre, unfiction, has had its share of people thinking that these things were real.
Yeah.
We talked about No Through Road on the Analog Horror episode. Similar concept, like people saw that on YouTube and thought this was a real thing that happened.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of wild. I kind of feel like anytime you make something where there's like verisimilitude, where it makes it seem like, oh, this is like appearing to be real, there are going to be people who are fooled, no matter how many hoops you jump through to be like, this is fake. People are going to believe it, because that just happens with normal fiction.
Yeah, well, even like normal, like nonfiction.
Yeah.
Like I am constantly reminded of there's a time when I believe LA had a huge blackout, so like the entire city went dark.
Yeah.
And because these people had been living in LA and they're so used to all sorts of light pollution, there were a bunch of people who started calling like their local police stations, being like, what is that in the sky? Because they had never seen the Milky Way before and had no context for it. There's even now, I just saw this the other day and I keep thinking about it. There's a whole subreddit on Reddit called r/It's Always Pleiades, where like people will take a picture of something in the sky and be like, what is this? It's the star cluster Pleiades.
Yeah, because they think it's aliens or something like that. Yeah, it happens all the time. The creators of the show, the producers, the directors, like they said multiple times, they were like, we never made this to fool anyone. We never made this with the intent for it to be like a hoax where people would think it was real.
We weren't trying to trick you.
Yes, we just used realism to heighten the scare.
Yeah.
It made it seem real so that like that would make it scarier to watch, but we did not ever want you to think that it was real. We wanted you to think that it was fictional, but just like believable.
Yeah.
And I think they did a good job. That's just, kind of how it is. BBC never aired this again. Ever.
I bet.
They put it up. It was very popular, but because of the controversy and the backlash, they just never put it up again. Despite that, Ghostwatch was hugely influential.
Oh, yeah.
To the found footage horror genre, to like a lot of independent filmmakers later on. Not kind of until more recently directly. The first film that I found that like directly references Ghostwatch was Host, which came out in 2020. It was like a Zoom call horror movie where everyone's on like a Zoom call.
Okay, there are too many movies named Host or The Host.
Yeah.
Because there's also the Stephanie Meyer one and then the Boon Jong-hoon one, which is like the monster in the river.
Yes. It's not The Host, it's just Host.
Sure, yeah.
And it came out, I remember it came out during COVID. Mm-hmm. And it was like a movie where literally like everybody is just sitting on like a Zoom call the whole time, and then they like all get killed off. I didn't see it, but I remember seeing the trailers for it, and some people really liked it.
I saw a movie like that, but this was like well before. This was like the 2010s. Unfriended. I saw Unfriended.
Similar concept. Yeah.
Sure.
But Host apparently has some specific references to Ghostwatch.
Oh, interesting.
Late Night with the Devil.
Absolutely.
Also specifically inspired by Ghostwatch. The whole idea of having like the TV studio as like paranormal stuff is happening, that comes from Ghostwatch.
And Late Night with the Devil specifically presents it as like, this is the unedited tape from that night.
Yeah. And you know, like I said, we just talked about Unfiction, we just talked about analog horror. Ghostwatch absolutely like fits into that. Obviously it was from the early 90s, but it's a lot of the horror comes from the technological sort of means, the visual presentation, the aesthetic, the time period. And it's presented as Unfiction, is presented as though it is real, even though it is fictional.
Mm-hmm.
One of the most interesting things to me, though, is that maybe the biggest influence is that real ghost investigation shows basically stole its format. When you think about those like ghost hunter shows and like Most Haunted or whatever, that didn't exist in the early 90s.
Yeah.
Like there were occasional shows that did similar kind of like, you know, investigation sorts of things. That did exist. But like having like a whole television show where that's what you did every week, that didn't really exist. And they basically borrow that format.
Yeah.
That's a hugely influential format for those shows, where it's like, oh yeah, we got guys in the studio, or in the truck, and they're watching the cameras, and we've got people walking around investigating and talking to people and trying to, you know, invoke these like ghost whatever. I think it's fascinating that that's sort of like one of its longest lasting legacies, is that it kind of defined the ghost hunting show unintentionally.
Mm-hmm.
In 2006, Stephen Volk, the writer for this, he would write a short story called 3110, October 31st.
Yeah.
In, you know, Europe, they do the day first and then the month second. There are reasons to do it that way. There are reasons to do it the other way. I'm not going to say one is better, Europeans. But it's kind of a sequel. He wrote like a short story anthology, and there's a sequel to Ghostwatch. I have not read it. That sounds really cool. 2012, they made a documentary called Ghostwatch Behind the Curtains, where they interviewed all the people who were in it. That was where they found out that they couldn't find Keith Ferrari.
Oh, that's amazing.
Which I think is hysterical.
We should watch that at some point.
I would love to watch that. People really like that. Apparently, it's a you know, an interesting documentary. And gosh, I will have to say, I must give a shout out. You know, I did my normal like internet research where I look at like Wikipedia, and I look at like other articles that people wrote about it. There's a specific YouTube channel called Back in the Day that did the story of Ghostwatch. It's just like a 20-minute short documentary about it, and like that's kind of how I learned a lot of the stuff about this movie. And they are a British person. I'm assuming Scottish just by the accent, but I can't 100% tell. Gives like a very like in culture description of like what it was like to watch it.
That's cool.
Which I think is very cool. So, you know, go check out that video. I don't, you know, want to make it sound like I did all this myself. You know, they good stuff.
Pulled all that information together.
Exactly.
You can also watch this. It is on YouTube. We rented it. It was like $2.
Yeah, it's like $2. If you have AMC or Showtime, like premium or whatever, it's included in that, I believe, too. So, you know, but yeah, it's $2 if you want to rent it on YouTube, high definition. It's great. And I think if you buy, you know, you can buy a DVD, but if you want to buy it digitally, you can also buy it digitally. I don't know who sells the DVD. Probably not in the US unless you get it used. But yeah, final thoughts.
Oh, I had a fun time. I was ooked out and spooked out, and we're gonna have to watch some comedy stuff after this, because otherwise I'm gonna have like nightmares when I go to bed tonight.
Listeners, you must understand that in our house, Hannah has a bedroom upstairs, and I have a bedroom on the second floor. Hers is on the third floor, mine's on the second floor. And we usually stay in my bedroom, and she's got her rabbit up on the third floor. So occasionally, just in the middle of the night, there will just be loud banging because the rabbit is thumping on the floor. And
she sees ghosts.
Yeah. And the sounds that they were making in the movie is exactly like that noise, and I'm laughing so hard because I know I'm going to wake up at 3 a.m. to some rabbit thumps and be like, pipes! Watch this movie. Watch this movie. I highly recommend it. Anytime I can recommend something that you might just not know about.
Yes, absolutely. I second that. Definitely give it a check out. It's super good and very spooky. Watch it in the dark. Watch it with your friends. Watch it by yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Pop some popcorn. Eat some treacle. What are some British snacks?
Yeah, treacle.
Toffee.
Biscuits. Biscuits and tea.
Jellied eels.
There was actually a Reddit thread recently where it's like, what's something that people think is popular in your country and isn't? And one of the top ones for like the UK was no one eats jellied eels.
Yeah, someone said, I think in that thread, I remember reading it, they were like, there's like one small part of London where it's kind of like a traditional food, but everywhere else nobody eats it.
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, that makes sense. All right. Well, this has been a fun month.
Yeah.
I love watching spooky stuff, and you heard us talk about some spooky stuff that we love, but we also watched some other things this month for the first time, and maybe next year you'll hear about them.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're going to definitely do this again next year, I think.
Absolutely. I also think it'd be a little bit fun, like, like the tail end of, like, January when everything is really dark and it feels like spring's not coming back. We need to do, like, one horror episode.
Oh, yeah,
then.
totally. Like, one each.
Yeah.
Yeah. We don't need to have only horror during Halloween.
No, yeah.
But I do like having specifically...
It turns out you can be scared any time of the year.
Yeah. In fact, the scariest time of last year was January.
Yeah, it was. Oh, God. Real world horror has come crashing back in. Here I was, escaping it for a moment, and to live in, like nostalgic horror of the past in a different country.
Remember when ghosts were scary?
Yeah.
All right.
To a lot of people, ghosts are still scary, and they're more scared of the ghosts than they are of the actual horrible things. And to those people, I say, get your head out of your ass.
Yeah. Anyway.
Anywhoozleby.
I've been Donovan.
I've been Hannah.
And happy Halloween, everyone.
Happy Halloween.
We'll see you next time.
Toodaloo.